Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode, I want to say 4 of I Have Thoughts. It's me, Erica Eiffel, and I am here with you, and we're gonna get to some interesting topics today. So, first of all, I really have no housekeeping except I already have a guest for next week. This week, you have just me. Next week, we're going to talk more about China and Hong Kong. But this week, we're going to talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and about the Black public servants suing the government. So, without further ado, let me just start. I wrote a piece in the Hill Times this week, and it starts off acknowledging the December 6th anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre, which was in December 6, 1989. 14 women were massacred in an anti-feminist attack. It is now known as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on the Violence Against Women. However, I would say that Indigenous women have not gotten the same respect or recognition, especially from this government that loves to cling to this idea of reconciliation. Although I will say that reconciliation has I just wonder if it's gone by the wayside. And I wonder if it's gone by the wayside in such a way that that it's kind of become not as prominent anymore in this government's sort of way of the way it sees its so-called most important relationship. So I have to say, I really do feel that, and I wrote this, that there is a violence tax levied against Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit people. And it's a tax that is paid through the setup of the system, and I will get to that later. And it is paid sometimes in the form of Indigenous women's lives. And so what we have on our hands is basically a human rights crisis, which has largely been ignored by this government in terms of action. So I want to get to what really inspired me. And what really inspired me inspired this kind of post when everybody else was talking about something else, was that, number one, I have never written really about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I've mentioned it as sort of like an offshoot, but I've never actually written about it. So this was my first time, and it was, I think, very necessary, especially given that on Monday, if you guys don't know, the Royal Commission on the Status of Women and that report had its 50th anniversary. So let me queue up. I guess I should have had this queued up before, but let me queue up what really inspired me on this one. I think that one of the things that it's one thing to say we don't acknowledge women and violence against women in Canadian society. but we definitely don't acknowledge the violence incurred by Indigenous women enough. Um, and we think about it's almost as though it's expected. It's so normalized that I just don't know how we expect to work through this trauma and the trauma of Indigenous peoples if we don't actually talk about the structures that led to it and the things that led to it. So I'm still looking for this piece, but while I do, let me see if you guys have any comments. Fine, don't say anything. You guys comment. Okay. So I guess, this could go all the way back to the doctrine of discovery. And let me just talk about, by the way, I found the piece. Good. So let me talk to you first about the doctrine of discovery. What is this? Give me a second, you guys. It's a hell of a thing when I have to go through my own thing and I don't even know what I wrote. Okay, so the doctrine of discovery is a philosophical framework for Christian explorers to lay claim to territories uninhabited by Christians. So this goes back way into like the I think probably about the 1500s, the 16th century. And under this belief, title to lands lay with the government whose subjects traveled to and occupied a territory whose inhabitants were not subjects of a European Christian monarch. So basically, if European explorers went somewhere and there were people there, but they weren't governed under a European Christian monarch, it was kind of like they were not there, and the title was up for grabs, and they could take the title and take the land, basically. And this doctrine of discovery was strongly upheld by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, who financed Christopher Columbus's first expedition to America. And these Spanish monarchs were strongly backed by Pope Alexander VI, who confirmed their right of possession to all newly discovered lands in the Americas. So basically, this is a papal policy. And this papal policy was basically how the title and ownership of the lands discovered by these European discoverers was codified in law. So Pope Alexander VI issued a papal bull in 1493 to justify Christian European explorers' claims on the land and waterways they allegedly discovered, and promote Christian domination and superiority, and has been applied in Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and the Americas. If an explorer proclaims to have discovered the land in the name of a Christian European monarch, plants a flag in its soil, and reports his discovery to the European rulers and returns to occupy it, the land is now his, even if someone was there first. Let that sink in. Yes, I know. So in 1960, I believe it was, the UN disavowed and the doctrine of discovery, and there was a repudiation of it, which is obviously too little too late. But Canada has never repudiated this doctrine of discovery. Because think about it, if it did, that would mean that the land that we all occupy would be null and void. They would not belong to the people who claim ownership over it now. So this idea of title is very important, and it's very important in, if you remember, Wet'suwet'en and I think Dagamu court case, which determined that that they did have title, and how that worked out in terms of the legislation was something that, of course, the BC government was supposed to figure out. But as usual, governments kick the can down the road and don't really follow up on these things. Thank you for commenting. Anyway, you know, I'm trying to get this as an aside, I'm trying to get this done, like, sorted through Instagram, and I'm finding it really difficult. So this is supposed to be live streaming on Instagram, but I doubt it is. Anyway, that's an irritation that I will get to at a certain point, I'm sure. So that's the doctrine of discovery in a nutshell. And what it has led to is a further encroachment and what's the word I should use? Further encroachment of what that ownership looks like by the descendants of these European discoverers. So if you think about the French and then the English that upseated the French, and their ownership, it still holds, basically. So I'm not going to go through. I will say this. How this relates to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is really, 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 really nicely laid out in the final report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, which came out in June of... Oh, I am live on IG. Yay! Thank you. It actually works. Go figure. Okay. Anyway, how the doctrine of, like, how this all, like, kind of works is based on, it's really nicely laid out on the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls final report. Came out last year, June 2019. It's a long read. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It is a fucking long read, but it is such an engaging read. I cannot tell you how engaging this read is, because it talks about intersectionality. It draws a through line from, like, literally discovery all the way to today. It is a history lesson that is necessary in Canada. I'm telling you, it is amazing. I'm working through it now because, to be fair, I did not read it the first time. I read pieces, and I read pieces of it for my article in the Hill Times this week. But sorry, didn't really read it, and now I want to. So I strongly suggest that everybody read it. Okay, so now that we've gone through the doctrine of discovery, let's jump to today and talk about what the Liberals promised. So the Liberal government basically promised that they would why is there, you guys, hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. I have an interruption. Somebody's at the door. Oh, what? Why did you? I'm on live stream here. Why did you interrupt me? Oh, I didn't know. Oh. Yes, you're back. I see that. I wanted to open the door. I know. I was coming. Sorry. Some people really like ring the doorbell when they have keys. I'm just saying. Well, y'all had, but yet you came into the house without me opening the door, therefore you had keys. Yes, I am complaining. Yes, everybody on the internet knows I'm complaining about you. Okay, so let's get back to Doctrine of Discovery. Okay, let's get back to murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Now they're talking about me, you guys. You can hear it. They're talking badly about me. Watch. Anyway, this is what happens when you have West Indian parents. So let me get back to what the hell I was talking about. So, I think that the Liberals made a promise, which they of course failed to keep. And the promise was that a year after the final report came out, which was, as I said, in June 2019, what they were supposed to do was come up with an action plan. And surprise, surprise, they didn't. Citing COVID, of course. Although my how should I say, my complaint is that COVID took them out from maybe February or March to June. What were they doing all the other time? That's what I want to know. I'm just saying that it's possible that it would have been delayed without COVID anyway. So let's go to Leah MP. Leah. Okay. Gazan, NDP MP for Winnipeg Center, who basically brought this up again and was like, what the hell, you guys? What are you doing? So this is her Twitter, and let's see what she says.
Once you get into the area that's a pretty trouble, you know what comes next.
So that's basically, what the what Carolyn. Oh, jeez. Uh, Now I lost my train of thought. I hate when that happens. Okay. Minister Carolyn Bennett in the House of Commons, Crown Indigenous Minister, basically said that, our hearts are all with all of the survivors and families of missing and murdered and two-spirited gender diverse peoples. And my thing is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where her heart is. I don't care about how she feels. A lot of people don't care about how she feels. What is true and right, or what is true and real, is what she has failed to do, what this government has failed to do, and this government keeps failing Indigenous peoples, especially Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited people. So basically, I just want to throw down some stats for you guys. Indigenous women and girls are disproportionately victimized by violence from a system that targets them for erasure through assimilation. I will get back to that erasure through assimilation. Estimates by Indigenous Women's Group count the number of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls at 4,000. And a 2014 Amnesty International report states that StatsCan suggests that the national homicide rate for Indigenous women is at least 7 times higher than that for non-Indigenous women. And so, this is a crisis. This is a human rights crisis. And I just feel that it's just falling through the cracks intentionally, because to actually address it would mean going back to that doctrine of discovery. And it always goes back to the land. So it's amazing to me how we have come to this point where Indigenous peoples have to basically beg for things like clean water. The clean water, like as we all know, or if you haven't heard, the federal government has actually missed yet, I believe this is yet another deadline to fix polluted water on reserves and unclean water on reserves. And we're going through a pandemic. And Indigenous communities are more vulnerable through this pandemic than non-Indigenous communities. And therefore, the need for even just clean water to wash, to sanitize, to do all the things that we take for granted is even greater now. And the government is, again, failing at providing the basic necessities, base necessities that they are legislated to provide. And can we just take a moment and talk about how disgraceful that is? Because it's disgraceful. It's literally a disgrace. So let's go back and look at some other stuff. I feel like once I click back and forth, anyway. Let me do this. No, let me spotlight that. That's better. So let's go back now to this. Let's take a look. Um, sorry, you guys. I'm still working with this friggin' pro version. Once I figured out the. There we go. So this is the Hill Times article that I'm reading from. And it comes out every Wednesday, just letting you guys know. But if we look at this, and we look to see, let's see what this guy has to say. Who is, what we're looking at, Indigenous Service Minister Mark Miller. And let's see what he has to say, because let's see what they tell us is the problem. Seriously? No. I'm really irritated that CBC decided that they were going to, okay. So anyway, what this comes down to is that, dude, for those of you who couldn't hear, dude is basically saying that First Nations is basically saying that So that's the story. I mean, I think what I know you guys couldn't hear Mark Miller, so I will play him again. But knowing CBC, they will probably put on an ad. Yes, they did. So once that ad stops playing, I will add it. So all this to say that basically what Mark Miller's saying is that, you know, we won't meet the deadline. What families don't want is, or what Indigenous people don't want. Oh, here we go.
No.
So I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, I don't know what the government can say that will make this better. I mean, to be honest, I feel as though this what people don't want is an auto-imposed deadline is just their way of saying we don't know when it's going to be fixed. And the letter from the little girl, she's right. They are ghosts. They have been put into a box, only to be dusted off at times when it helps liberal marketing, when they want to seem inclusive, when they want to seem diverse, when they want to seem, you know, I just feel like this government uses Indigenous people for their own marketing, just like they use Black people. So anyway, all this to say that, um, as usual, Indigenous people fall through the cracks and they pay for it with their lives. And it's already bad enough that the vaccine is not going to get to them in the time frame that it would get to the rest of us in cities. Rural areas, areas on reserve are particularly vulnerable. But let's be honest, like who put the reserves there in the first place? So I get it. Like I get that logistically it's difficult, but at the end of the day, these people are not going to have clean drinking water yet again. I don't know what else to say about that except to say, you know, that just seems to be, again, it seems to be a normalized kind of thing in Canada that we keep failing these people and it's not right. Just on like a simple level, like it's just not right. But let's get back to missing and murdered. So, I will say this. One of the things that has kind of provoked me into writing about this is because, you know, these things go in waves. And marginalized people in this country only get media attention in waves, right? When something big happens. And there isn't, and even when they do get media attention, it is treated with the most basic type of treatment and the most like first order and flimsy and shallow type of treatment. One, because of newsrooms being particularly white. Two, because of editors being particularly white and executive producers being particularly white. And, you know, the way, so to me, like, I want to do kind of what we did on Bad and Bitchy, which is to give some depth to these issues. Because I really do think if we learn a little bit more about our country, we won't cling to this idea, this false idea of what our country is. Anyway, that is my little piece in terms of what I want to say. So let's get back to missing and murdered. Um, oh, that's an interesting. I'm gonna have to. Oh, look. I'm gonna have to call her back. Okay. It's amazing like how many things are distracting me this week. Like I'm just like, I don't know what to say. Okay. Let's go back to who's having a sale? Oh, never mind. Let's get back to the Hill Times piece and let's go back to the final report. So this is the final report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. As I said, it is a good idea to look through it. There are 2 volumes. It will help you understand a lot of things differently, not only Canada, but there is a nice little, let's see where that is. There is a nice piece here about intersectionality, a summary of overlapping oppressions and identity markers. So you have the structural forces that built the structures for which oppression flows through, hence why racism, sexism, cultural, all of that is structural, it's systemic. And these are the structures, the particular structures that feed into the systemic nature of all of these types of discrimination. And the identities that get caught up in these types of discrimination. So if you think about social, political, and economic marginalization and how that forms economic, political, and social exclusion and discrimination based on that. And the types of identities could be socioeconomic status, it could be race, it could be gender. All of these things are caught up in that. And this is a really nice sort of outline of how these things all intersect with each other. And this is what people don't understand about systemic discrimination. It is historic. It is overlapping. It filters out identities and how those identities interact, they interact with the structure and which forms this discrimination. And I think that there's just a lot of that kind of teaching that has to be done writ large in general. I'm going to plug Not in My Color right now, which is my business, which is doing a masterclass on this type of structural intersection and discrimination and aspects of identity. So that's something that the report does really nicely. But I want to kind of think about how the truths and the truth gathering process and how these become micro, how the macro becomes micro. So how does the structure of something like uh, for example, the Indian Act become violence against missing, like, Indigenous women? And it does because the Indian Act undermined women and girls and placed them in very difficult situations. What it did is it separated gender from its community, and it in this document is very patriarchal. Let's be honest. But if an Indigenous woman married outside of her community, she lost everything: resources, support, money, everything. And she couldn't even live on her lands. And as we know, bad things happen to women who are isolated. And once that isolation occurs, it makes Indigenous women very vulnerable. And so, and vulnerable to those people who might do them harm, and the system who does them harm too. So I think that there is very much like a really good interconnectedness in terms of where historically Canada's relationship with Indigenous people started and how it's formed this human rights crisis and that through line. So I personally would say, please read that document. I am not going to go much further into it because, frankly, number one, I want to say it's not my story to tell, but I also want to say that it's a story that you should listen to, period. So let's move on to something else. And basically what we're going to move on to is Black people in the public service who have decided to sue the federal government for systemic discrimination and racism in terms of hiring and promotions. And basically what these people are saying is that, hey, you had a duty to us to uphold our charter rights to create a harassment and discrimination-free workplace. And that's what you have failed to do. So we're suing you for $900 million. That's right, $900 million. And we're suing you for $900 million because we're going back to 1970. And we are going to sue you for all of those people from that time who did not receive the treatment that they should have. And that's equitable treatment. I just want to say that one of the things that I wrote about this with the Globe, actually, which will come out on Sunday or Monday. So make sure you get Monday's paper Globe, and make sure you check out the Globe and Mail on Sunday, because I will be in it talking about this because I wrote something about it. And what I can say is that it is one of the things that the plaintiffs have said was that there is ghettoized treatment of Black employees in the public service. They are trapped in low-paying positions and trapped in low-paying levels so that they never actually get the They never get promoted into leadership positions, while non-Black and white, non-Black racialized people and white people move up a lot faster than they do, even if they know less, even if they have um, fewer skills or less experience. So, which to me says systemic racism. So, what's going on here is, I think, in the big scheme of things, ever since George Floyd, ever since the summer, what has started out as protests against police brutality has turned into protests against anti-Black racism. Right now, students are occupying, I'm not sure which building, but they are occupying a building at Ottawa U to protest systemic racism with students, and to protest those who have been um, basically attacked by racism and racists. To be honest, this has not been a good year for the for Ottawa U. So remember, they had that kid in that was stopped by campus police and carded, and the police called on him for skateboarding. So that happened about a year and a half ago. Then, of course, we have the N-word debacle, where a professor at Ottawa U decided to use the N-word willy-nilly. And now a school building is being occupied by students protesting, protesting anti-Black racism. And, I will say this, a reckoning is happening. I understand that there are students at a a Catholic school in North York are also occupying part of the school to protest anti-Black racism. Here in Calgary, over spring, this should have made national headlines, but of course, our Canadian media tends to be a little anti-Black and tends to not think of our issues as important, and therefore did not make national news. But kids here in Calgary walked out of school to protest systemic racism and protested. And so there, as I said, there is a reckoning happening. It may not be today or tomorrow, but I just wonder when, there's going to be more in the new year, because frankly, we're in a pandemic, and the environment is ripe for protesting. And, as Black people, we've taken this for too long. We've been silenced for too long. We've been silent for too long. And I stand in solidarity with all of those people, in the students at the North York Catholic School, at Ottawa U, the Black people who are suing the federal government. I mean, this is only the beginning, and unless Canada gets its P's and Q's in order, this is only going to keep happening. You have not seen disruption yet. And again, solidarity, because this is ridiculous. You cannot continue to tell us how diversity is our strength, and then turn around and treat us like trash. And then turn around and tell Indigenous people that they can't have clean water. Or turn around and tell Indigenous people we're taking your children because of birth alerts. Or turn around and telling Black people that their concerns don't mean crap about the police. Or turning around and telling us that, oh, we're listening to you, but vote for a $13.2 million hike in the budget for police in the middle of a pandemic. yet defunding housing and social housing in the middle of the pandemic, in the middle of winter. How does that fly? I don't know. And to be honest, it's really about time that all of us really get together and do something about this, because to me, what is happening is that for so long we've let power get away with being power. We've allowed them to impose the standards upon which we are allowed to speak, we are allowed to protest, we're allowed to get angry. And these are not the people who are going to be affected by these issues. These are the people who are going to try to keep us in line. And to be honest, I can see why in France, after a Black man was horribly beaten by the police, and then Macron, who is everybody's favorite liberal, okay, then decides he's going to pass a bill making it illegal to film the police, which is funny because the police weren't actually filmed by anybody in that instance. They were actually just filmed by a surveillance camera. So again, it just allowed him the opening to impose this oppression upon marginalized people specifically, and journalists. And so what we are seeing now is the truth. And so, in Paris, what did they do? They burned shit down. I gotta say this about the French. They know how to burn shit down. These people burned down a bank, and all of a sudden, the new law is suspended. And that's how you get shit done. I honestly think this peaceful protesting only goes so far. And, at some point, like, I don't blame people, is all I'm saying. I'm not saying you should go out and do it. I'm just saying I don't necessarily see it. I don't necessarily pearl clutch when people actually do it. So, that's a lot of me talking. I'm really tired because this week I wrote 3 pieces, and I'm just really exhausted. Check me out next week when I will have a much more, I don't want to say engaging, but I think there's a China, Hong Kong topic that we have not been talking about and that we really start to need to talk about. And as somebody said to me, Erica, if you don't like the media, make your own. And this is what I'm doing. So I will leave you with this. Visit notinmycolor.com, where, there we go, where all of my Hill Times articles will be uploaded to, so you can read them after the fact. I will try to upload the latest one tomorrow, so you guys can read it. Also, take a look around the website. We are putting together a masterclass on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and basically an anti-racism masterclass. That's what we're doing. And that class is going to start in February. So you have some time to sign up. You can do so on the website. And we'll talk more about structural discrimination, racism, intersectionality, the difference between equity and equality, and all of those good stuff. So until next week, peace out, you guys. Solidarity to all of those fighting oppression. Look, mask up. Social distance. It's going to be a rough winter, but come check me out Thursdays at 9:00. Every Thursday, 9:00. Except I am taking 2 weeks off before Christmas, but I'll be back next week. All right, you guys, peace out.